my name is Crystal Fletcher, and welcome to All About Books. I'll be launching a new segment that features author interviews, and as a book lover, there is nothing better than author insight. So please subscribe to my channel so you can hear about what inspires authors. Now, to kick things off, I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking with Lucy E.M. Black. Lucy is an educator. She's published a collection of short stories called The Marzipan Fruit Basket and a wonderful novel called Eleanor Courtown. Now, Eleanor Courtown is a historical fiction that takes place in 1870, and it follows a young woman of privilege who leaves Ireland in secret in search of her much-loved cousin in Orange Hill, Ontario. And when Eleanor arrives in Ontario, things do not go according to plan. So Lucy, thank you so much for coming on today to speak with me. And I was wondering if we could start things off with you telling us about when you started writing and why.
Oh, thank you, Crystal, and thank you for having me here. It's such a privilege to be part of your new program. The genesis of this book is really quite fun. My husband and I had a small farm in the country in Cartwright Township, and I noticed that there was a parcel of land down the road from our own farm that was never farmed. It was never tilled. No one seemed to look after this land at all. And I was curious about it. So one day I asked a local farmer and he said, "Oh, that." He said, "The locals believe that land is cursed." And of course I was really interested. So I asked him for the story and he told me that during the Irish potato famine, a family had come over from Ireland and they had cleared the farm and were working it when a rich Irish spinster came to visit, and she was a cousin of theirs, and they decided to poison her so they could steal her money. And what happened was they put arsenic in her food, and unknown to the farmer, she would go to the farmyard after she had eaten it. She was sick to her stomach, and the animals came and they ate her vomit. And this went on for a period of time, and the farmer noticed that his livestock was starting to sicken and die. So he called a local authority on animals. I don't know if he was a veterinarian, but he knew a lot about animals, and he came and saw at once that the animals had been poisoned. So he sent for the authorities to come from Bowmanville to see what was going on with these animals. He figured something was amok. And Bowmanville was about a 3-hour horse ride at the time. And when the authorities came the next morning, they discovered that the farm was empty. There was no sign of the animals. There was no sign of the family furniture. They had completely disappeared in the night without a trace. No one heard them leaving. No one was able to track them down afterwards. So the story went round the township that the little people had spirited them away in the night and cursed the farm for 100 years. And so it was not farmed for about 110 years. It only recently became a working farm again. So I just thought the story was too great not to tell. And that's the beginning of my tale.
Oh, wow. And Lucy, you take the readers back to 1870, and beautifully, everything from the mannerisms, the etiquette, to actual life in Pioneer Village and the rural community. Where did you start with your research to be so accurate?
Well, I love the 19th century literature. And that was an area of study for me at the university level. So anything from the 19th century was very much a part of my reading passion, if you will. So it came fairly naturally, and It's structured loosely as a novel of manners, very much in the style of something that Jane Austen would have written. Not that I'm anywhere near as good as Jane Austen, but just the emphasis on the day-to-day living and the relationships and the social customs and mores that are all a part of this book. So a lot of that came to me from my understanding of novels of manners, but also an understanding of the community in which we were living. There is so much in this book that's based on local legends of the community. Local individuals in the community told me stories which, you know, they gave me permission to weave into the text. So it was really a coming together of lots of disparate pieces in my life, if you will. You may remember we talk about Tinkertown in the book, which is a little village of tinkers on the edge of a swamp. And that's actually based on a real place in Cartwright Township. Mm-hmm. And the locals tell me that when you go out onto the ice in the wintertime and you look down, you can see the chimneys of these houses still there from the 1870s. It was flooded, the whole lake was flooded by a dam in Lindsay in the early 1900s. And these houses were flooded, but you can still see the remains of Tinkertown. So those stories were just so rich. I embedded them in the narrative. So it's a story of Eleanor, but to a certain extent, it's also a bit of a love story for Cartwright Township.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, you've done a fantastic job of keeping Eleanor's voice true to the era. Like you're an educator, you're a modern woman, and I never heard your voice creep through Eleanor. So how did you maintain the authenticity of Eleanor's voice?
Well, you're a writer yourself, Crystal, so I think you'll understand when I say that Eleanor became fairly real to me, and I could hear her voice when I was reading. So to a certain extent, I was channeling a character, and the character was informing a lot of what took place. And then, to be truthful, I mean, there were many, many edits of the text. Yeah. You know, many drafts, many edits.
You certainly did a great job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And while you were writing, Lucy, just kind of along that same vein, were there any moments when, after you had finished writing a passage, where you were just like, oh, you know, thank you, Eleanor, like you just had one of those incredible aha moments, like you knew you had it right?
Well, a strange thing happened, actually. When I'd completely finished the draft of the novel, you'll know that the innkeepers were called the McClanahans. Yes. And they're among my favorite characters. I really, really enjoyed writing them. Yes. But my husband and I were exploring the old Caesars Cemetery, which is in Cartwright Township. And we spent quite a bit of time after I'd written the draft going through the cemetery. It was a beautiful fall day, and we were just going for a walk. And all of a sudden, my husband sort of shouted and called me over to a tombstone. And the name was Harry McClanahan. Oh, you're kidding. And the dates would have matched. You know, I think he passed away in 1880 something. And it was serendipity, but it also felt like a bit of a confirmation. It was quite special. Oh, absolutely. And Lucy, today I was hoping that you would read us a segment from Eleanor Courtown, and it is author's pick. So if you could just share with us before you start reading why you've chosen this passage. Eleanor meets a number of people when she settles in Orange Hill, And one of the people she meets and befriends her is a much older and fairly unattractive to Eleanor character named Dr. Stewart. And Eleanor has decided that she is going to live with her cousin and her cousin's husband to help them out. And they're living in a fairly primitive arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And the cousin's second husband seems a bit of a shady or dubious character. So Eleanor's newfound friends at the inn are not happy about this. The doctor takes Eleanor for a ride in the country, and he's trying to talk her out of making this move. And I chose this, it's a page and a half. I chose this because I think it gives you a bit of a flavor of Eleanor's feistiness, if that's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, she is feisty. I really liked that in her.
Oh, good. So this is Dr. Stewart speaking at the beginning. Miss Curtin, he began, you must know by now that I am intending to be your friend. And as your friend, I must say I am unhappy about your decision to reside with the Careys, however briefly. You are not suited to such a place, and I have a strong foreboding of ill. Is that all? I asked. No, he replied, standing up and becoming quite animated. That is not all. You are headstrong and determined, but also vulnerable and in need of protection. I am driven half mad with worry about you some days. It is miraculous to me that you have come this far and are yet unharmed. I was taken aback by the direction of this outburst. Why should I not be safe? I travel in good company and conduct myself as any lady would do. I am very capable of managing and can look after myself. You are not, he said gruffly. You underestimate danger. Here you are, for instance, at Perry's Glen in the middle of a wilderness, in the company of a man you have known but a month. What would you do if I acted improperly? How would you correct me? You are but a slip of a woman, trusting too readily. Tears of anger filled my eyes. You are a gentleman, I said, moving closer to him, and I am not afraid of you. I looked up angrily into his face. You would not dare to insult me, not even in this uncivilized place. I am your equal in rank and station, and I will not be cowed. And what, said he, what would you do to stop me from making improper advances? Any man could overpower you. He placed his hands on my arms and held them firmly to demonstrate his point. Both of us were angry. I placed my hands upon his arms and grasped them tightly. I would fight you, I said evenly, to the death. He released me at this and began to laugh. I was furious, and I stood with clenched fists ready to prove myself. But he moved apart, sat down once more, laughing each time he looked at me. I was insulted and stood over him, ready to abuse him for his lack of civility.
It's just so telling her personality, isn't it? It's beautiful. Now, Lucy, this was your debut novel. When you look back at it now, is there anything that you would do differently to the novel?
One of the things, because it was my first novel, I didn't know when to stop. And there were lots of really great stories and a lot of research I did on Dr. Stewart and medical practice at the time.
Yes.
So my first draft of the novel was well over 400 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So my editors, my story editor and my copy editor slashed out huge chunks of the book. And I think I think sometimes that I wish that I had left a little bit more of the medical work in there in terms of Dr. Stewart's practice. But
Mm-hmm.
that just may be because I found it so interesting. I found it really hard to let go of when they made those cuts.
And I mean, I'm sure a lot of your readers are wondering, where will there be a sequel? Like, is Eleanor's story, is there more to tell, Lucy?
There is actually. You will know at the end of the book, she had a daughter, Kathleen.
Yes.
And the sequel is percolating back there, but it will be Kathleen. It will all be about Kathleen when she becomes a young woman and is taken by her mother to Ireland to meet her family there and make some of her own choices. So there is a sequel. I have a couple of other writing projects on the go. So that one's percolating in the back burner. But I think Kathleen's story will come out eventually.
Oh, fantastic. And you've kind of opened the door, so I will ask about your other projects that are percolating right now. Like, I do understand that there's a new novel to be released in 2021,
Yes,
Now Never Publishing.
that's correct. Yes.
And can you tell us what we can expect in your new novel? Like, what's it called and what's it about?
Thank you. The novel is called Stella's Carpet, and it is told in the present tense. The narrator is Stella. She's a young woman in her early 20s, and she's a teacher. And she has a very interesting family. She lives in a small town in Ontario, and her parents are divorced. Her father was an orthodontist who collected Persian carpets, and he remarried a woman who was a carpet broker from Iran, and they have a new family. But Stella's grandparents on her mother's side are called the Lipinskis, and they live in High Park in Toronto. And both of them were survivors of the horrible trauma that took place in Europe during World War II. So grandfather Lipinski was taken prisoner by the Russians at the beginning of the war and eventually escaped and joined the British Army and liberated Holland. Grandmother Lipinski was taken prisoner and was sent to Theresienstadt, which was a work camp. So the Lipinskis are this lovely Polish couple that Stella is very close to. And her father, even though he has divorced their daughter, is also very close to the Lipinskis. And there are lots of secrets, lots of little mysteries in terms of the connections taking place among the individuals, why William continues to be so close to his ex-in-laws. The book, I think, talks about family a great deal. It talks about what it means to be family and who you choose to embrace as family. And it looks at trauma. There's the Lipinskis have really suffered a great deal of trauma, but their daughter, Stella's mother, Pamela, has also suffered trauma. And hers is what's known as intergenerational trauma. So she is a child of parents who suffered during the war. And that trauma, we now know, carries through to second generation. And so the book looks at family, it looks at forgiveness and reconciliation, and it looks at the effects of trauma and the choices that people make. So I'm just thrilled that Now or Never Publishing has taken this on and sees it as a worthwhile project. And I'm really anxious to see how it's received, if people can appreciate Stella's story.
I can hardly wait, and I'm also really intrigued to read it because it sounds so different from Eleanor.
It is very different. And you know yourself, one of the great fun things about writing is that you sit down and the characters just take over and they shape the story once they begin to form. And that was very much so with Eleanor Courtown and also with Stella's Carpet. So although Stella's Carpet is quite a bit more serious and deals with some fairly serious issues, the Lipinskis to me were fun to write. They're loving people, not dissimilar, I think, to the McClanahans. And so there will be some interesting parallels, I think, for people when they read both books, although the tone is certainly different and the voice is certainly different.
Oh, it's really exciting, Lucy. I'm really excited. So yeah, and I have to apologize. I've been mispronouncing Eleanor's last name the whole time.
No, don't apologize. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Yes.
But an Irish person did contact me by email who has the same surname and indicated that it was Courtown. So I've been using that pronunciation, but I think Courtown, Courtown, it's fine. Tomato, tomato.
I was like, oh no, that's very kind of you. And with to that point, with any of your readers, did you have any you had contacts from Ireland who also went over your manuscript, or?
We went to Ireland to do some research for the book.
Okay, yes.
And I've certainly heard from people, a lot of people of Irish descent who've given me feedback on the book. You know, with apologies for anything I may have got wrong, but people have been very generous.
Okay. Well, Lucy, I would like to thank you so much for your time today, for speaking with me about Eleanor and about your future book, Stella. I love it. Another strong woman voice we've got going on. Really appreciate it that you helped me kick things off. And I hope I'll be able to convince you to come back when Stella is launched into the real world as well. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you. And for any of the listeners, I will provide links to Lucy's website so you can learn more about Lucy and her other works. And also if you'd like to purchase a copy of Eleanor Courtown, where you can find that. So thank you so much, Lucy. And thank you for listening for everyone else.
Bye-bye.
Bye.